I didn't want a life just to do a job. I wanted a life that I could change things, shift the culture, shift the narrative. And I'm still very lucky, but I'm still able to do it.
John Demsey is the former executive group president of Estee Lauder companies, where he built and scaled some of the world's most iconic brands, including MAC Cosmetics and Tom Ford Beauty.
My personal story is all about leaps. I was working in a lot of jobs, being people's number two for 15 years. I was not an overnight sensation. I took MAC from a niche indie beauty brand to what its high watermark was the largest color cosmetic brand in the world.
When you run something so big, there's usually some very hard challenge that comes with it.
Well, I had two challenges. First of all, the large corporations of the world that were used to the more mass merchandise techniques, they don't work the same way anymore. There's been such an evolution and so much disruption in the beauty business because
I have to start, first of all, from a funny and fun fact, John. How many dogs did you just say you have?
I have 12 dogs and 2 cats. So there are 14 animals living in the house, along with a 17-year-old daughter.
Who gets more attention, the daughter or the...
You know what? The daughter gets the attention because that's how we ended up with the dogs. So
Good answer. So, John, I want to take you back in time because I want us to start understanding who is John and how does John grow up, in tiny Ohio, if you will, not in LA, not in New York, and eventually goes and reshapes an industry that is huge. And it's a lot about, connections. And so how did you grow up and what intrigued you about the space?
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I am the son of, my father was an industrialist in the steel business. My mother was a painter. I grew up in a fairly small community and with a fairly average, normal life. I was very fortunate that my parents were incredibly generous, fabulous, and wanted me to have all the opportunities that maybe they didn't have, and to be able to see the world and to push the boundaries of what I could be or become. And, growing up, in a fairly normal place,
Right.
drawing to, I went to public school, I went to prep school. I grew up in the Jewish community. My father was first generation. My mother was second generation. So growing up in sort of that generational dynamic of
Right.
coming from the old country or learning how to fit in or being American or being second generation or third generation defined a lot of about who I was. And I always was a very active, sort of mind wandering sort of kid. I always had dreams. I lost myself in the movies, reading books, reading magazines, watching TV, listening to music, because I always felt that the world had so much to offer and that I wanted to be the person that had something to offer to the world.
Mm.
And it didn't happen by grand design. It happened organically. I was a painter. I took art classes. I traveled around the world every summer. It was either on a European tour or tennis camp in the south of France or climbing Mount Fuji in Japan on a study tour. But from the age of 12, my parents allowed me basically to leave and to explore and to immerse myself outside of my comfort zone and to be exposed to different people, different culture, and different aspects of life from all socioeconomic backgrounds.
At that point, when you're a kid or a teen, if you will, at that point, do you know that you're going to be drawn to fashion, or did that just kind of stumbled on you?
I always was somebody that loved the escapism of music and film and magazines. I'm really going to date myself here. And my parents were pretty fashionable, actually, considering where I grew up. My mother's father was in the yarn business, and his father had started a company in Jamestown, New York called National Spinning. And my mother, they were the manufacturers of Rudy Gernreich. So growing up in Shaker Heights, Ohio, my mother was walking around in the mall in Rudy Gernreich, not the topless bikini. But so my mother was really fashionable, and my father loved architecture and design. And so
You exposed to it.
I was exposed to it and things that you wouldn't expect a kid to be exposed to growing up in Ohio. So
Right.
I was very fortunate to have had enlightened parents who
Right.
always were curious and wanted to know and pushed me to be the same kind of person.
Right. And then you went to college. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
Unconventional choice at the time. In retrospect, brilliant choice. I went to Stanford University. At the time, my final 3 years of high school, I went to a prep school in Cleveland called University School, which was 100 kids, and which most of the legacy students went on to Ivy League or East Coast or Midwestern sort of pillar schools.
Right.
And I chose to go to California, and I chose to go to Stanford because it was not the traditional choice. Stanford was and is even more so an amazing educational institution, but I wanted to do something different than everybody else. And at that time, people didn't even know that Stanford wasn't in Connecticut. I mean, so we're talking a while back here. Now it's the top rated university, in the
Right.
country. But it was an unconventional choice to go far away from home, to go to a place that was not within
Right.
my social circle, and to experience life in a different way. So
Right.
it was a great experience. In retrospect, my choice of going there and the type of things that I'm interested in those years, Stanford was really famous for engineering, computer technology, um, foreign policy. It actually was not as strong in the arts, the humanities, liberal arts. And so I discovered the fact that actually I was interested in the arts, in creative, in style, in fashion, in filmmaking, and entertainment, and photography, in
Right.
an environment where all the Silicon Valley legends were incubating while I was in school. So it was really, this was the time period in the 70s where the student would quit his junior year, hire his professor, and start a multi-billion-dollar technology company. And I was not that tech person. I was not an engineer. Um, but I was there in this moment where the Bay Area, and particularly the peninsula
Right.
in Silicon Valley, became the building blocks of the society that we live in right now.
Right.
So
And
that
it's fascinating times to be around, I'm sure.
so I was there. Texas Instruments in Hewlett Packard were the touch on IBM. Apple
Amazing.
Computer was just starting.
Right.
Facebook would happen 2 or 3 or 4 years later. But all these things and all these people and all that thought process was incubating in that academic environment. So I was there on the ground floor. So
Amazing.
not
And you
not by
started as an yeah.
not by
Go ahead,
grand
sorry.
design, not by grand design, but by instinct.
Yeah, but instincts count a lot in business. We'll talk about it. But you started as an artist and in sales, right? I mean, there's like Revlon and Macy's and Bloomingdale and Saks and Benetton. Like, I can't even. How did you get to some of these, and what shaped you?
I studied undergraduate. I studied French literature and economics because I had to sort of reconcile the ethereal creative side of myself and the need to
Make money.
perhaps work towards something to make money and have a career. Reconciling my artistic mother and my business-minded father. When I graduated from Stanford, I'd lived a year in Paris as part of my senior year. And
Right.
when I arrived in Paris, I didn't. It was a program that was between Stanford University and NYU, and I chose not to live with a family, but I found an apartment in the International Herald Tribune because I wanted to live by myself. And the apartment that I found was the chambre de bonne, or the maid's room, in a hotel particulier that was the epicenter of Andy Warhol's factory. So growing up in Cleveland, where people were wearing duck pants and the preppy handbook and all that other jazz, I arrive in Paris studying, living in this building with the Brandolini family and Andy Warhol and the founder of Club Med on Rue de Cherche Midi. And this was the beginning of my personal enlightenment or understanding the world that I did not know existed. And as being there as a student, I was in the middle of watching the entire factory underground scene of those years where everyone could be famous for 15 minutes. And it had a huge impact on me. And by being in Paris in those years, I got to know a lot of people in the fragrance business, in retail, in fashion, and in the arts. And I grew to learn that actually that was a business and something I was actually interested in.
Is that overwhelming? Is that scary? Is that exciting? Like,
it should have been overwhelming. Many of the things in my career, I should have been scared because had I actually known what I was up against or known what I was walking into, I may not have had the guts or the drive to actually understand what could go wrong or why I could not succeed. So and just one other side backstory for the beauty business that dovetails into this. My grandmother's first cousin was a man named Bernie Mitchell, who had made a killing after World War II selling air conditioning units in Chicago. And he was trying to develop an entrepreneurial business. And he discovered that there were great gross margin profits in the fragrance business. And he created Jovan. So Jovan Musk was the pheromone musk sex fragrance of the 70s and the 80s. So I had a cousin, a third cousin, but a cousin who had become very successful in the beauty industry, creating something that was part of the family. So it was in the background.
it gives you a seed that it's possible.
Anything is possible, but if you don't expose yourself to a lot of things, I guess this is my first life lesson. You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't like until you try it. And I've always been a person that's tried not to have preconceived notions and to push myself to learn things and be places that maybe I would like or maybe that I wouldn't like. But how would I know unless I exposed myself to it? So having the experience of spending a lot of time internationally growing up, studying abroad, and being touched by the bug of this, dream maker sort of iconography of fashion and art and beauty and entertainment. These things really spoke to me.
Right.
And so I went to Paris, graduated Stanford, came home. I remember coming off the plane in Cleveland, and at the time, the branché thing to do in France was to have your collar up.
Like the movies.
Yes, and my father, the first thing he did when I got off the plane was put my collar down. He said, "You need to put your collar down." And I said, "Why are you asking me to put my collar down?" He says, "Everybody in Paris wears their collar this way." And he said to me, "You're not in Paris anymore." So that was the first inkling that I had that I needed to get out of Dodge, and that my future was not going to be in Cleveland, Ohio,
Wow.
and that I needed to venture out into the world with some preconceived notions of what I wanted out of it. But I didn't have a master plan. I just knew I wanted to do something that was creative, inventive, exciting, that was not the standard path that all my friends took. I went to NYU Business School. I went to Stern. I studied finance and marketing, once again, trying to bridge that making a living and doing something, more creative and more brand oriented. And when I graduated from business school in 1982 at Stern, I had to get a job. And I applied to a lot of advertising agencies, and I applied to some beauty companies and some entertainment companies on things that I was interested in. And my dad told me if I didn't get a job, I'd have to come back to Cleveland and to go into the family steel business. So a friend of the family knew Rosemary Bravo. And Rosemary Bravo, who went on to become the CEO of Burberry and was actually on the board of Estee Lauder, gave me my first job. And I went into the executive training program of Macy's in 1982 in retail. It was a great retail training program, but I never knew that I never had any inkling of going into retail. And everything I ever learned or was exposed to in business began there.
Yeah.
Starting on the floor, starting as an assistant buyer, a trainee, learning the business from entrepreneurs and for people actually in the business of selling things and merchandising things. And I'm the guy who never could hold a job for longer than a year and a half for the first 11 years of my life, the guy that never left the job. So for the first 10 years of my career, I was at Macy's, I was at Bloomingdale's, I was at Saks Fifth Avenue, I was a fragrance buyer, an assistant beauty buyer, and I met every entrepreneur from Estee Lauder to Charles Revson to, Guerlain family, the Hermes family, and I got to be part of sort of the 80s beauty zeitgeist when all this sort of new beauty, particularly in fragrance with Giorgio and Beverly Hills and Bijan fragrances and sort of the first wave of indie brands. And I cut my metal there, and then went and did an assignment, which I had no idea what I was doing. Went to work for Luciano Benetton, and at the time, which was based in Treviso, and on a startup of bringing fragrance and beauty products into Benetton stores, which was way ahead of anybody doing anything like that. Was there for a short while, then went to work for Revlon in the prestige division. This was just the time that Ron Perlman had taken control of Revlon, and Revlon still was a major prestige player. And so for 12 years, I did a lot of scrappy jobs. I met amazing people that inspired me and taught me things and gave me breaks. And I can say that after my Macy's job, I never looked for a job ever again. it always came to me based on my work and my experience.
What we call the hidden market. Basically, people brought you in because
Yes.
they've seen you. Yeah.
And one of the things that goes back and everything connects in some weird sort of way, when I worked at Bloomingdale's as an assistant, you had to work on Sundays. And on Sundays in those years, the buying floor was right off of the sales floor. And on Sundays, Estee Lauder, who at that time was in her 80s, would walk into Bloomingdale's 59th Street and they would say that Estee Lauder is here. We need to go get her customers because she wants to start doing some makeovers. So I got to know Estee Lauder and actually Leonard Lauder and the Lauder family in the years actually when I was on the shop floor at Bloomingdale's and saw this legend actually come in and actually interact and touch customers every single time that she would come in.
What an incredible experience. So wait, so Estee Lauder herself would actually make people's makeup
Yes.
and herself.
She would walk in and say, "Where are my girls?" That's how she referred to her sales staff. She goes, "I want people in the chair. I want to show them
Wow.
how they can be beautiful." And
Wow.
being exposed to all this entrepreneurship in retail and all these people in independent businesses and giant multinational companies and working in skincare, makeup, and fragrance and marketing and advertising, this was the best experience, better than any
Right.
education anyone ever could have. And when
Right.
I think about what would my life have looked like had I gotten into Harvard Business School right out of school, or not done this type of path, or had ended up in a big corporation, in a big training program, in a big way, would I have had the experiences or the exposure to what I had? And the answer most likely is not.
No. Right.
And my advice that I tell people when they start is that you need to explore everything and you need to see it from every touch point, whether it's from a manufacturing side, the retail side, a customer side, a development side, an international side, but exposing yourself to all the spokes in the wheel have
Right.
for me been
Tremendous.
probably the greatest gift. My finding a way to marshal those experiences and to make them into a career that I was
Right.
able to develop and bring something of myself that was different than everybody else
Right.
has been sort of the underpinning of what my business success.
And that's incredible. I just want to stop here for a second. And for the listeners, a lot of times we hear people that are scared, that are too generalist. And I think, if you really lean in and you hear this, actually the fact that John touched every single one of these roles is a big reason why you were able to overarch and understand the bigger picture. Like that. Am I hearing you right?
You're hearing me completely right because I had the respect and understanding of everybody's job.
Right.
And you know what? Being in New York as an outsider, because when you're not from New York, you're not from New York. And being in New York as an outsider and growing up in a Midwestern environment and going to California for college, I saw the world a little bit differently than people that grew up in
Right.
privileged Ivy League, Eastern
Sure.
Seaboard. And so I've been exposed to a lot and exposed to a lot of different people. And I never would have known what I was good at or not good at if I had stuck with a preconceived notion. So
Right.
my advice to anybody is figure out what make you love, what you're passionate about, and figure out how you fit into that world and how you can carve out your unique space or to say something individual or unique.
Right. And the only way to find this out is by experimenting, just like you did. It's not, you're not just going to know, but you're going to experiment with different things. And it's
I had good jobs and bad jobs. I had great successes I had failures. I had people that wished me well. I had people that did not wish me well. I learned probably more from the people that didn't wish me well, from the people who were there nurturing me to wish me well. Life is messy. Working in business and in careers is about dealing with all different types of people from all different types of walks of life. And you need to know and learn how to negotiate that. And growing up a bit of a protected kid, no one prepares you for that. No one tells you, you know, what are the watch outs. And so my experience has been grounded in real life, and my real life grounded experience led me to a career of high glamour, high fashion, trend, and aspiration that I actually had a chance to be part of the culture and influence it. So for a kid who grew up as an observer looking through the window to the world of other people doing great things, I actually was able to establish myself as somebody who actually was making those decisions and doing them myself. And once again,
It's amazing.
it sounds a bit folksy, but it's true.
Yeah. So tell us how you got to Mac and some of those early lessons there.
Early '90s, I'm approached by the Estee Lauder companies. Estee Lauder is still alive, and at the time, I was like VP of sales in a commercial role, for Princess Marcella Borghese and the specialty division of Revlon. And I was offered the opportunity to go to work for the mothership brand, Estee Lauder, and to take a lesser job in title, a lateral position to go run the West Coast office for the Estee Lauder brand. And so in 1991, I moved to LA, left my comfort zone in New York City after a decade, and went to work for what was then a privately held company. And once again, events that changed my life forever. Because when I arrived in LA in the early '90s, which was a really good period to be in Los Angeles, I got connected in with the entertainment world. And I got connected in with the entire worlds of music and film and photography and production and agents and the creators of yesteryear. But I really, it was life changing for me because all of a sudden I was plugged into Hollywood, and not by grand design, but because of the role and the exposure that I got to sit at the table or be part of a community that normally I never would have been part of. And that had an impact.
Right. And I think at that point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Mac created this movement, right? They were bold. They drove collaborations with pop stars.
So, I'll take you on the journey. So
take me on the journey.
Take the early '90s. I stay in LA a year and a half. I'm brought back to New York. I'm the number 2 executive at the Estee Lauder brand, reporting to Robin Burns and Leonard Lauder. I get an offer from Paris for a hot shit brand with a globally recognized luxury company. I thought, well, I think I'll go move to Paris. And Leonard Lauder told me, you're not leaving. I said, well, what do you mean? He says, you can't leave. We've invested too much in you and you've invested too much in us. And he said, well, I'd like you to become the president of Prescriptives. And Prescriptives was that old school color, which was Estee Lauder's, indie brand that was developed internally. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't think that's the right job because I don't think it has a great future. And at that time, Estee Lauder went public in 1995, and Leonard had actually invested in MAC Cosmetics from the original 2 founders, Frank Toscan and Frank Angelo. And by 1998, when the company had taken over MAC, it was a $60 million business. Frank Angelo had passed away. Frank Toscan was there. The business was based in Toronto, Canada. And Leonard said, "What about Mac?" And I said, "You know what? I'm in." I had no idea what I was in for. I knew the brand was cool. I knew the brand was counterculture. Um, I took a place in Toronto, and the only piece of advice I was given was go make Mac more Mac than it ever was. So when I arrived in this business, people were terrified. Here was this guy in the navy blue suit, the suit from Estee Lauder, coming to this brand that was counterculture, driven by makeup artists and people living on the fringe, wearing black. And I went from the men in blue suits to the men and women in black. And I always loved pop music, and I always loved, the art scene. But here I was in an alternative world and in an alternative universe. So where Estee Lauder was, the, the Philharmonic or Lincoln Center, or doing things that were, more traditional, or the Southern Women's Show, or doing things in more traditional beauty paradigms. Here I was in a
Almost opposite.
the complete opposite, where gender fluidity and standards of beauty were completely a 180 from what I had been exposed to. And I embraced it. And I took all those people who were afraid that I would destroy what made this thing so unique
Special.
and special. And my 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 lifelong mantra is the answer is always in the room. You don't have to leave the room. When I walked into Mac and I met the people who built that business, I built the business off of the authenticity, the ethics, the values, and the unconventional embrace of things that might be disturbing or different for the more conservative parts of the world. And I took Mac from a niche indie beauty brand to what its high watermark was, the largest color cosmetic brand in the world. And in that job, which once again, I mean, yes, I knew what I was doing, but did I know how to run a factory? No. Did I know how to do R&D? No. Did I know how to do product development? No. Was I a PR expert? No. Did I like fashion as a customer, or did I like, entertainment as a viewer? Yes. But I all of a sudden was in a position to do something. And I took that experience and I took that opportunity to define the path for Mac, which went on for 24 years and created something granted on the incredible foundations of the founders of that brand and the incredible value system of that brand. But so much so that people think I'm from Canada. I was so synonymous with the success of Mac, and I didn't get Mac until I was 39 years old. So I was working in a lot of jobs for a lot of people, being people's number two for, 15 years. I was not an overnight sensation, and I was always the same person I always was. But there I was in a position to actually do something.
Right. When you run something so big and you try to create such a big transformation, there are usually some very hard challenge that comes with it.
Yes.
Can you share something?
Well, I had two challenges. First of all, I had the challenge of going someplace that was 180 degrees from the company that I was working for. And I needed to, first of all, prove my worth to the people actually who built that business, and that I wasn't just riding on somebody's coattails, but actually that I did have a vision and I could take this business forward to be a global player and to embrace its inclusivity and its diversity in a way that made a difference. At the same time, I had to deal with my senior management who had no idea what I was talking about or what these people were doing. They knew they were very successful and they wanted part of that financial success, but they had no idea how fundamentally different it was to the way that they ran all their other businesses. And that was a challenge because I needed to prove myself to people who didn't think I could understand and defend myself to people who wanted me to deliver what they wanted. And I needed to bridge the two worlds. I needed to have a point of view. And it's always about people. I have always surrounded myself by great people, young people, older people, people with experience. And at Mac, my personal assistant became the personal assistant who was the founder's personal assistant from the beginning of the company, Beverly. I took the makeup artist that created the brand. I found the makeup artist who worked in the UK on Princess Diana's makeup. And I brought these people in that were the unsung heroes of Mac, and I brought them into the tent with me. I moved the business to New York. I set up a pro shop with the founder of the company, and I learned the fashion culture makeup game on the ground, building the brand and building relationships. And not only did I do it in the US and Canada, I opened up almost every single international market in the world. The brand had been established in London and Paris and Hong Kong and Milan, but I would go and I would understand. This is before social media. This is before the internet. The internet just actually, it's
Starts.
kind of interesting. 1998, the year that I took control, is the year that the internet was born. And that's when MySpace started arriving. And, the early days of the dial-up of AOL on your computer or, not even a laptop, on your desktop. And I would travel around the world and I would learn the culture of beauty, fashion, and humanity on the ground everywhere I went. And whether it was in Shanghai or Tokyo or Paris or Amsterdam or Berlin or South Africa or Brazil. And that experience of being able to be on the ground floor of defining culture and using a brand that was based on inclusion and diversity and democratic sort of pricing was an unbelievable opportunity. And the other thing was there was this little gem of a charity that was there called the Mac AIDS Fund. And when I arrived, they had a product called Viva Glam. And the Viva Glam lipstick was an overstock product that they created a campaign around to raise money for men, women, and children affected by HIV and AIDS. And the first spokesperson for that campaign was RuPaul, and then it was Katie Lang. So when I arrived in 1998, the Mac AIDS Fund had raised $1 million off of the sale of this lipstick and was talking about AIDS and sex and things that people were uncomfortable of and behavior and disenfranchised communities and people left behind. And I knew that I had been given this opportunity by divine intervention that I could do something. I took that Mac AIDS Fund over the course of 20-something odd years, and I became the largest non-pharma funder of HIV AIDS on the ground programs in the world. I raised $500 million. And I associated myself with bold-faced outspoken, sometimes polarizing celebrities who were talented and were not afraid to speak their mind. And it was that embracing of uncomfortable topics and things that mattered and things that affected people in the world that I knew I could make a difference. And
Right.
the more I did with Viva Glam and raising the money and raising the voice of the brand, the more successful the brand was, the
Amazing.
more successful the company was, and the more successful I was. So it really, and the interactions of the people, I'm the guy who made hip hop the reference point for beauty going into the early 2000s. In 1998, the number one song in the world was by TLC. It was called Unpretty. And the song sang about it doesn't matter how much Mac you wear. And it was that moment, and it was the MTV years, and Ozzy Osbourne and Sharon Osbourne and Kelly Osbourne were wearing Mac, and we were in MTV, and we were in the making of the band, and I was giving money to artists that like Amy Winehouse, or even
Take me
years
there.
later.
How did you even get to these artists? I think some people would love to hear.
First of all, the brand has incredible products, with products that pay off, that were developed by and used by makeup artists. And Madonna, when she did her Truth or Dare film, actually was one of the first people to wear MAC. And
Wow.
it was the combination of Madonna and Linda Evangelista, who grew up in the suburbs of Toronto near actually Niagara Falls, who took her Spice lip pencil. And when she became the supermodel of the world in the 90s, she brought these Canadian makeup products along with Naomi Campbell and along with Christy Turlington, who also was Canadian, and they took them around the world. And everybody wanted to know, what is this MAC?
What is this?
Who is it? What is it about it? And theoretically speaking, it shouldn't have worked, because it was a brand that was 100% experiential. It embraced core values and inclusivity and diversity before it was even discussed,
Cool.
dealt with uncomfortable issues, and supported a lot of artists who were flawed individuals of great talent. And being a brand that had the humanity to embrace the flaws in others
Right.
and define the beauty of the difference was what
Yeah.
made the brand a global phenomenon.
Incredible. Let me double click on this just for 1 second, though, John. Like, I know a lot of people are like, I would love to be able to reach out to some of these influencers or celebrities or pop artists. Let's talk to, and again, when you have a brand, it's easier to already, or when you have Madonna, you can already name drop. But share a story for a second from one of the first ones that you try to reach out, or maybe there was a rejection. Like the first ones are always the hardest to get them to say yes.
So I zoned myself first on who loved us, who loved the brand. And the people who loved the brand were drag queens and people of color, because there were no shades for people of color. And
Mm,
the beauty industry did not embrace Black artists and Black celebrities. So I tried originally, like everybody else, whoever, was the movie star or the model of the day. And people would say, well, I don't want to do that. That's too risky. There were a lot of very famous people that said, no, they don't want to be associated with something like this. And I met Mary J. Blige and Little Kim, and because they were wearing MAC. And so it began. And every single person that I met and developed an association with the company one didn't come from an agent. It came from my actually networking and working with fashion designers, backstage in shows, film production, movie production, um, video production, being involved with the MTV Awards and the VMAs or Much Music in Toronto. But I did it myself. I did, and I had an amazing communications partner. Her name is Michelle Feeney, who lives in London now. She has a brand called Flower Street. But I did it with like an amazing creative director, James Gager and Karen Buglisi, who did the commercial side. And I did it because I was fearless. If I had known what everybody else was paying or what everybody else was doing, I would have been too afraid to walk in the room and even ask. I had the audacity to walk in and to ask, and I never accepted no for an answer. So it happened. I don't even know if it could happen that way anymore today. It happened the old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Working hard, being there, being on the ground, but also willing to take risks, business risks, personal risks, reputational risks, doing things that were wildly commercial or wildly uncommercial. And the thing that's sort of interesting, I'll flash forward to a Mac story like mid to early tens, talking about the girl next door. And I went back to Cleveland, and we were talking about all these influencers and everything that was going on Instagram and YouTube and all these new stars and selling makeup, which was the explosion of what took place.
Right.
And everybody used to say, well, this brand is successful because that's the girl next door. And I thought, like, well, who do you live next door to? Who do you live next door to? And I went to the supermarket in Ohio, and the checkout girl had her makeup done full on Kim Kardashian with false eyelashes and contouring and lips and, all glittered up. And I thought, that is the girl next door. The girl next door went from fringe and niche to being the girl next door. And the girl next door went to fringe. So the whole orientation of the world and the way that the internet and online and social media started to mash up all these different cultures changed the real world order of actually what's beauty, what's shopping, what's discovery, what's aspirational. And it was a very, 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 very exciting time. I discussed the fact that I was at Stanford during the beginning of Silicon Valley, being in the beauty business and the advent of the internet and social media and being a first responder and participant in it built the success of the brand. And it was, I couldn't have asked for a better synthesis of the type of person I am or my philosophy of discovering and taking risks to have had the opportunity of Mac. But because that Mac was not enough. And because of my success, I was tapped on the shoulder and I was given, in addition to my Mac responsibilities, the mothership brand Estee Lauder, and which I had to deal with a more conservative, conventional beauty archetype. And this is coming off of like 9 years of, in black, full on Mac, full on, raging at the clubs and the concerts. And this was the time in early 2003-4 when Estee Lauder had passed away. And one of the people that I had met in my Mac years was Tom Ford. And actually, he had tried to hire me to run Yves Saint Laurent when he was there. And I used to send him brow products for he and his partner Richard because they liked the MAC brow gel. And he had not started his fashion brand yet. And I had the idea, with Leonard Lauder's full support, that I wanted to bring Tom Ford in to guest edit Estee Lauder to remine the equity of what Estee Lauder did in the 1940s and 50s with Youth Stew and Azure. So I had a collaboration with Tom Ford that basically reframed the Estee Lauder brand in a completely different way. And in return, we promised to build a brand for Tom Ford. And at the time, everybody thought that Leonard and I were out of our mind. Why would you commit to this world famous designer who did not have a standalone brand yet and put the money and resources behind it? I believed in Tom Ford, and I believed he had something to say. And
how scary is it at that point, John?
It was not scary then. When I reflect upon it, I should have been scared to death. I actually, when I started working on that, I was actually doing products that I wanted to buy. And when we started doing fragrance and started doing makeup and all the ideas and concepts and things that we worked on, we didn't do any market research. I said, I want to just do the best. I want to see the inclusivity and diversity in luxury that I saw in a democratic way from MAC. So the fragrances that Tom Ford and the Tom Ford team created were created based on archetypes of people around the world. So I did the most over-the-top oud that spoke to a Middle Eastern customer. I did the most gourmand slugs of vanilla for Latinas or jasmine. I did the most ethically spicy fragrances for the urban community. I did intellectual, sort of artistic fragrances that were appreciated by bourgeois people that don't even want people to know they're wearing fragrances. And the idea was to just bring out, along with Black Orchid, 12 fragrances that were unisex called Private Blend. And they were done based on the archetype of satisfying and bringing the best luxury product to audiences that were underserved. And that caused a revolution. It changed the fragrance business. The whole idea of designer fragrances from yesteryear or niche fragrance brands or all that you see with the successes of Byredo or the successes of, Diptyque or DS and Durga or Le Labo or Jo Malone or on and on and on and on. This was a paradigm shift because it went from doing a business that was just based on advertising and marketing, where actually the money was in the product, the experience, and the juice. And it revolutionized the fragrance business. I mean, that first mover, and it was at the time, at first, it was not that successful. But when it moved, the success of Tom Ford actually began in London, a counter in Selfridges, and all these people came and fell in love with the brand. And it created an entire industry of 50, 60, or 70 other brands that have used that playbook.
For somebody that doesn't know enough about the fragrance business, like how do you even test it? Do you have a test group to tell you if this is good or bad? Do you just guess?
I've looked at love at every side. So I've done commercial fragrances that are done with a lot of marketing rigor and consumer insights and testing and analytics and data. And when I did Tom Ford, I don't even know if I'd be allowed to do that right now. When I did Tom Ford, I did it based on a quest to push boundaries and to just serve up the best. Just the best. And some of them were very polarizing and not commercial. The things that we did that were commercial, that were like Dior and Chanel, didn't sell. The things that we did that took a risk or pushed boundaries redefined the entire industry. So,
Amazing.
marketing or product development or knowledge, a lot of times it helps you do the right thing for the right customer and the right business type. And other things, it tells you what you don't want to do.
Right.
So, playing against the commercial tendencies or playing against them. Because for every thing that's successful, there's something bubbling up that's going to emerge to displace it. So those two work experiences, sort of on the luxury and on the makeup side, and makeup artistry brands and artisanal niche fragrance brands, along with luxury skincare and the whole dermatological aesthetics aspect of the business, are probably the three biggest trends that have affected beauty for the last 40 years. And I was lucky because I got to participate and I learned on the job.
Right.
But I also learned from everybody else. I learned from people who no one talked to. I learned from the experts. I learned from the legends. And I always referred back to history.
Right.
Because if something worked 20 or 30 years ago, there was a reason. And to understand what that reason was and to understand that reason of why it would work today, it evolves and changes. And my ability to rapid prototype or adapt myself as the world has become more polarized, more digital first, with more emerging consumer, more fragmented, more niche. I've had to learn on how to remain current and relevant
Right.
as I get years and years older and my target customer is getting years and years younger. And a lot of executives have a very difficult time reconciling how to stay current. No, I'm lucky. These past 17 years, I've been able to grow up with a daughter, and I could start with Dora the Explorer and Peppa Pig and go all the way up to TikTok insanity right now. But I can see the world through her
From her
eyes.
eyes. Right.
I can see the world through my 32-year-old niece Molly's eyes. I can see the world through my mother 93-year-old eyes. But to be able to understand that in this digitized world that's community oriented, you have to understand these communities.
Right.
And you have to show up and communicate differently to each and every one of them. So for the large corporations of the world that were used to the more mass merchandise techniques, they don't work the same way anymore. And that's why there's been such an evolution and so much disruption
Right.
in the beauty business, because nothing is permanent. The only thing that's consistent to me, and this is why the beauty business has been good for me, good to me, is that beauty it's a universal aspiration. I don't know one person who thinks they look too good. I don't know one person who doesn't think they shouldn't be more attractive. I don't know one person who doesn't want to feel good in their skin, or one person that maybe wishes they could take a couple of years off. Or not.
Right.
No judgment. But it is an eternal quest.
There's always a need.
It's an unmet need,
Yeah.
because no one ever feels complete. And
Right.
the beauty business lives on that quest for that self-discovery. And some people think, am I in a business that monetizes people's insecurities or, plays to stereotypes. Yes, there are aspects of the business that do that.
Or give confidence. Depends how you look at it.
But the way that I look at it, beauty is a tool. And it can be used to be whoever you want to be. If you want to be or not, no judgment. And when you look at beauty that way, the world of possibilities are endless because there are so many customers and so many consumers and so many populations and people that have their own communities that want to be seen and be heard. And what Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or now ChatGPT does is you can actually be in that world and talk to that world in their words in real time. You just need to have the product and the way to sell it that they want it. And
Right.
as opposed to the old way of I'll make something, run some TV ads and some magazine ads and run some billboard advertising, and then they'll come to the mall and they'll buy it and everything will be fine.
So let me ask you, John, because at that point, I mean, you are with Tom Ford, and then you're overshadowing the Estee Lauder brand, and you see it grow to this mega multi-billion-dollar, incredibly entity. Around the 2022, you decide to leave, or there's a situation there, and I want to take you to a difficult topic because every single person that has done something big, there's going to be something, I think, somehow slamming their way. Talk to us a little bit about it.
Oh, and I made a mistake on something that I didn't understand fully. During COVID, I built my Instagram following from 10,000 people to 2 million people. And I would just repost grams. And I became sort of internet famous because people thought that my humor and my sarcastic wit and unique point of view was bringing joy and some happiness during a really, really, really dark time.
Right.
And so when people couldn't leave their house, and it was really, 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 really very sad. And as we came out of COVID, because I've always been a person that has never been shy and has been bold and embraced things that are perhaps controversial, one day on my feed, there was a piece of content from a Black content creator of a meme using the N-word in the context of COVID and Big Berg and the Snuffleupagus in a Little Red Riding Hood granny kind of thing. And when I saw N.A, being the Midwestern older guy, Jewish, with somebody dressed up in a granny outfit, N.A was Nana. I never used the N-word.
It sounds funny. It sounds funny.
It was funny because it also said that the person got coronavirus at the Chingy concert. And Chingy was a rap star in St. Louis, which was really inside baseball. So someone screen grabs the post. And listen, when you're successful, not everybody wishes you well.
No, that's the problem.
Someone does a screen grab of the post. It goes on a vigilante site. And my PR lead calls me about 45 minutes later and said, I don't think you understand what you just did. And she explained it, and I took it down immediately. It was just after George Floyd. It was the boiling moment in the entire world. And the narrative went from John Demsey, the builder of inclusion and diversity and the champion of everybody and everything, to being framed is an old, entitled, wealthy racist, where everything had been handed to me on a silver platter. I was working for a publicly traded company. I was not allowed to defend myself. I wasn't allowed to speak. And I needed to leave the job and the family that I loved for 32 and a half years. And to this very day, that false narrative on me still pops up from time to time. My daughter was cyberbullied by kids, about and people, giving me attributes or assigning me personality traits or characteristics that have nothing to do with me at all. The mistake that I made is I had a big job.
Right.
And with a big job comes big responsibility.
But
And
mistakes
I
can
should have been
happen.
more careful that understanding that people could misunderstand what I said. And I also learned that I didn't have permission to be 30 years old. I'm in my 60s. And these people have no idea who I am. These people have no idea what I did or what I did for these communities or how I supported people all these years. And it was very hurtful and it was traumatic. And my
It's so
father
traumatic.
and mother became ill, and all of a sudden I'm not working. I never had basically taken a day off. My life was my job, and my job was my life. And I couldn't work. And I was basically on a lockdown. And it was a trauma. And it took everything in my very inner soul to not lose sight of the fact of who I was and that I was not going to be the canceled guy and allowed somebody else to define my narrative with bad intentions.
And I want to go there for a second, John, because I think there's a lot of listeners that there's a lot of hate right now. There's a lot of digital hate. It's really easy to hate. It's really easy to ban someone. I personally got a lot of things, because my last name is Golan. So I got my whole world of, implications. So, and I totally understand, John. What I want to actually hear from you is a little bit. I know that you're onto some big things now, but it took a lot of muscle to reinvent yourself and what I call leap. And I want to talk there a little bit because some people need to hear this.
So first of all, I had to take inventory in myself. I had to bring myself in check. I was very successful. I was impulsive and down the rabbit hole in social media because I believe that social media was where you sold products, and that if you don't do it or live it, how can you possibly use it to build your brand? I went back home to Ohio. My father was dying. I went in my high school room. I looked around at my World Book Encyclopedia. I found some old records and things that I bought from Santana and Sly and the Family Stone and all these influences and things. And I went back to just being me, not being John Demsey, executive group president of Estee Lauder, or John Demsey with Tom Ford, or John Demsey with Mac. Just John Demsey, a nice guy who's trying to do the right thing for his family from Ohio, who got the opportunity to build incredible success and notoriety for myself that was taken away from me in a day.
Wow.
And I was afraid to go out. I couldn't even walk into a department store. I was physically ill. I felt guilty that somehow I'd let my company and my friends and people who believed in me down. At the same time, I was angry. At the same time, I felt, persecuted.
Right.
At the same time, I felt responsible. All these things very human. And I have a sort of a PR rabbi who helped actually organize this podcast with you, who thought this would be a great format to talk about this.
Right.
He said, and I said to him, well, should I take down my Instagram or should I do something differently? And he said, you're going to continue being you because
Yeah.
that's all that you know how to do. And that's what made you successful. Your eyes are open. You understand the pitfalls, but you go be you. Believe
Right.
in you. And I took the time to do a book where I'm a passionate art collector and love decorative arts and photography. And I actually took my house and created a coffee table book called Behind the Blue Door.
Which gorgeous. Yeah.
The book talks about living life to the max and discovering and doing things for others and not being afraid to be bold and outspoken. And I used it as a declaration for me as a person, not for the job that I had. And the blue door almost was like a double entendre because I do have a Yves Klein blue door. Because Estee Lauder was always referred to as Big Blue. And my
Huh.
point was, don't judge a book by its cover, or don't judge a book by the story that somebody tells as the unadulterated truth. And I didn't really talk about what happened to me. I just talked about it as sort of an intermezzo. But that was relaunching John Demsey, the person,
Nice.
not the guy behind a lot of famous brands.
Right.
And I learned a lot. I learned who my friends were. I learned who my friends were not. I understood people that were afraid to fraternize with me because it put them at risk. I was understanding and had great empathy. I was incredibly sad. I had a lot of PSTD. I worked on myself. I got myself in shape. I got myself more grounded with my family. I was there to be able to be there when my father died and to be there for my mother and, things that I would not have been able to have done had I been in the rat race or the roundabout of the job that I was in. And I was very fortunate that people remembered me. And people in Europe in particular who were outraged by this, who did not understand what was going on in the United States at all, reached out to me. And I began working. The first thing that I got was working as a senior advisor to El Catterton because I had served on the board of Baccarat and got to know Michael Chu, who's the executive chairman of the company. The company is backed by LVMH in part.
Nice.
And I started being called by a lot of international companies
Right.
who said, I want to turn John Demsey's disadvantage to our advantage. And because I never would have left my job.
Right.
I never would have
Exactly.
left the job. I was too loyal. I was too committed to the people and the things that I was doing.
So now you can help more.
Yeah, and I learned that there's a very big world out there
Right.
that loved knowing me and knowing my perspective and have given me opportunities, sometimes behind the scenes, sometime in front of the scenes. But I'm working with some of the biggest, wealthiest families and beauty and fashion and retail companies in the world. I publicly declare 3 of my activities, but half of my activities are still between me and my clients.
But you're on to some big things, John. What do you want to share?
I can share with you three public things.
Okay, with some of the public things.
In a world of NDAs, the things that I can talk about is first, Elle Catterton. I'm a senior advisor in beauty, and I was part of the deal team that bought a brand called Kiko Milano. Kiko Milano is a makeup brand from Milan that is the largest independent makeup brand in the world. And I have been working for the last year and a half with the amazing Kiko team of Simone Dominici and the Elle Catterton team and the Kiko team of reframing Kiko, what I think is going to be a beauty revolution around the world.
Nice.
My second activity, which was smaller but no less important, was the family behind Shinsegae in Korea, which are the descendants or children of the founders of Samsung, hired me as a senior advisor to their beauty business on importing beauty brands into Korea and actually helping them with the brands that they were working on.
Wow.
And then lastly, I was working as a consultant to the Gap Inc. And through my work at Catterton, I got to know the Fisher family through Manzanita because they own a lot of beauty brands that we love or wanted to own. And Richard Dixon, who is the epic CEO of the company, and I have known each other since he was the Estee Lauder buyer, or going back over 30-something years. And he invited me to come in and draft and create a proposal with consulting support and within the organization to imagine what beauty could represent to the Gap. And it was announced publicly about a month ago. This is incredibly exciting.
So, John, based on everything you have, I want to kind of summarize. What would be one thing that you wish you would tell your younger self?
Don't be in such a hurry. I was a guy who was always in a hurry, a bit impulsive, thinking that time was running out, whether it's pushing a meme on Instagram before you took a second to reflect upon it, or thinking that you should be doing certain things at certain stages of your life or have a certain status. You got to believe in you got to know yourself. You need to know your strengths. You need to know what your value add is and where you make a difference if you want that kind of life. I wanted a life, I didn't want a life just to do a job. I wanted a life that I could change things, shift the culture, shift the narrative. And I'm still very lucky that I'm still able to do it, even after an unfortunate pause. So I'm a guy that grew up analog, listening to the radio, who transformed himself into the digital age, embracing all media, building brands on social media, interrupted professionally and personally by social media, and moving forward again. So my story is a story of the long distance.
Always reinventing, always at the forefront.
I do not think of myself, and people ask me, what gives me the right to do things for younger people? And the thing is that I don't think of myself as being my age.
Right.
That's an ageist way of looking at things. I think of myself as current as somebody 22 years old. Sometimes I think of myself as more current of some of these younger people that I've met because I never stop the hunt or the lust or the desire for understanding what's next, what's interesting, and what's new. And if you're not curious and you're not willing to take risks, or you're not able to push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. And I guess for
That's
your
beautiful.
philosophy of your business and your podcast. I understand now why Matthew felt that I should speak with you with the Leap Academy, because my personal story is all about leaps. And
Exactly.
sometimes with no one below me to catch me, and sometimes getting hurt, but never giving up. And if that's the best advice I can give everybody is if you be focused and understand what it is that you're trying to do. Have a plan, but it's never going to end up the way you planned it. You need to be flexible and have the humility to know that God has a plan, and you don't always know it. So that's my overarching philosophy.
Continue reinventing and leaping and doing big things with a big heart. And
And you know what, Mike, I'm speaking to you even today about something that I have not even spoken about this publicly up until about a week ago, in the last 3.5 years, about my interruption.
Mhm.
I'm being my authentic self. I'm telling the story in my words, in the way that I know that it happened. And if you're not going to like me, there's nothing I can do to make you change your mind. All that matters is that I'm true to myself. I'm good in the businesses that I'm part of, and making them successful, and making sure that all the stakeholders are enjoying it with me.
And I love that conversation, John. I think it's really, really important. Again, I think I shared with you, we had Don Ariely on the show, who had a lot of hate for, again, for things that he.
When I had my announcement of the Gap, which they were very proud, and they knew, everything. Everybody's everybody knows everything.
Right.
The haters came out.
They
And they
always
started
will.
posting things. They posted things on the corporate website of the Gap. They started posting things about, and I just thought, like, will this ever go away? And the reality of it is, once it's online, it's forever. And all you can do is define yourself by your actions,
And be
your
you and be
behaviors,
good.
and be a good
Yeah.
person.
And that's why I wanted to shine an amazing light on you, John. I know you created incredible change. There's a lot more coming. There's always going to be haters, and we're going to change the world despite of them. So let's go,
I
John.
wish I could talk to each and every one of them, apologize, or try to explain my story.
Yeah.
But I need to look forward.
We all have.
I'm optimistic and love what I do, and love what I do every single day. And that's the key to success.
Oh, and I want every single person that is listening to this to have the same sense of hunger and pride in what they do, and to continue leaping again to something great. So, John, thank you so much for opening up and to sharing your story, and to continue changing the beauty industry.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk about these things that I'm passionate about.
More episodes that you're going to love are right around the corner, so definitely make sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel. Also, who in your life should see this today? Do share this with them. This will inspire and help those you care about, and helps us continue to bring amazing guests. And I will see you there.